An old woman mocked by a famous singer during a charity show in Nashville. What happened next silenced the entire world. This is the story of Margaret Thompson, a 72-year-old grandmother who stepped onto that stage carrying decades of forgotten dreams. When arrogant pop star Derek Sterling decided to humiliate her in front of hundreds, he had no idea he was about to witness something that would change his life forever. Sometimes, the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. The Grand Ole Opry House in Nashville buzzed with anticipation on that crisp October evening. Golden lights illuminated the historic venue as hundreds of people filled the seats for the annual Hearts for Nashville charity benefit. The air carried that familiar blend of excitement and Southern hospitality that made Music City so special. Margaret Maggie Thompson adjusted her navy blue dress and smoothed her silver hair, which she'd carefully pinned into an elegant bun for the occasion. At 72, she still carried herself with the grace of someone who'd once commanded stages, though those days felt like a lifetime ago. Her weathered hands, adorned with her late husband's wedding ring, clutched a small purse as she settled into her seat in the fifth row. "This should be wonderful, dear," she whispered to her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who'd convinced her to attend. Maggie rarely ventured out for evening events anymore, but something about tonight felt different, electric even. Backstage, Derek Sterling checked his reflection one final time. The 35-year-old pop sensation ran his fingers through his perfectly styled dark hair and straightened his shimmering golden blazer. His latest single had just hit number 3 on the charts, and he knew tonight's performance would be filmed for social media. Everything had to be flawless. "5 minutes, Mr. Sterling," called his assistant. Derek's eyes gleamed with that familiar cockiness that had made him both famous and infamous. He'd built his career on being provocative, pushing boundaries, and giving audiences exactly what they didn't expect. Tonight would be no different. The lights dimmed as the evening's host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hearts for Nashville. Tonight we're not just celebrating music, we're celebrating the power of community, the strength of our neighbors, and the magic that happens when ordinary people do extraordinary things." The crowd erupted in applause. Maggie clapped politely, her mind drifting to memories of stages she'd graced decades ago, backing up some of the biggest names in country music. Those were different times, when respect flowed both ways between performers and audiences. Now, please welcome our headlining act, the chart-topping sensation taking the world by storm, Derek Sterling. The stage exploded with pyrotechnics as Derek strutted out, his golden jacket catching every spotlight. The younger audience members screamed with excitement, while the older attendees, including Maggie, watched with curious politeness. Derek grabbed the microphone stand with theatrical flair, his voice booming across the venue. "Nashville, are you ready to see what real talent looks like?" Derek's opening number shook the entire venue. His voice, backed by thunderous bass and dazzling lights, commanded attention from every corner of the auditorium. The younger crowd sang along enthusiastically, while the older attendees watched with respectful attention. As the song ended, Derek wiped his brow dramatically. "You know what I love about Nashville?" he shouted into the microphone. "This city knows real talent when it hears it." The crowd cheered, though some of the older folks shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But here's the thing," Derek continued, his voice taking on a mischievous tone. "I bet there are people in this audience tonight who think they've got what it takes to share this stage with me." He laughed, and a few audience members chuckled nervously. The host had mentioned earlier that the evening would include a community spotlight segment, where local residents could showcase their talents. It was meant to embody the charitable spirit of the event, giving ordinary folks a moment to shine. Derek's eyes scanned the crowd predatorily. "So, who's brave enough? Who thinks they can handle the pressure up here with a real professional?" Several hands shot up tentatively throughout the audience. Derek's gaze landed on a young woman in the third row, then moved to a teenager near the back. But then something caught his attention. An elderly woman in a navy blue dress, sitting quietly in the fifth row. Maggie hadn't raised her hand. She was simply listening, lost in memories of when she used to perform on stages just like this one. Her fingers unconsciously tapped against her purse to the rhythm of the background music. "You?" Derek pointed directly at her, his voice booming through the microphone. "Yes, you, Grandma in the blue dress. I saw you moving to the beat. Think you got some pipes hidden in there?" The spotlight swung to illuminate Maggie, who looked startled and confused. Hundreds of eyes turned toward her as she blinked in the harsh light. "Oh, I wasn't," Maggie began softly, but Derek cut her off. "Come on now, don't be shy. This is your chance to live out those karaoke dreams." Derek's tone was patronizing, drawing uncomfortable laughter from some audience members. "I bet you've been singing in the church choir for, what, 40 years? 50? Maggie's cheeks flushed as she shook her head gently. "Really? I don't think—" "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Derek's voice grew more mocking. "Or maybe you realize you're a little out of your league up here with the big kids." The audience grew increasingly uncomfortable. Some people were laughing, but others looked embarrassed for the elderly woman caught in the spotlight. Mrs. Patterson squeezed Maggie's arm supportively. Derek persisted, sensing he had the crowd's attention. "I tell you what, Grandma, why don't you come up here and show us how they used to do it back in the day? I promise I'll go easy on you." His smile was sharp and condescending. Something shifted in Maggie's expression. The embarrassment faded, replaced by a quiet dignity that seemed to straighten her shoulders. She'd been underestimated before, dismissed because of her age, her appearance, her quiet demeanor. "Actually," Maggie said, her voice carrying clearly despite its gentleness, "I think I will." The audience fell silent, surprised by her response. Derek's eyebrows shot up. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. He'd anticipated her backing down, maybe getting a few laughs at her expense before moving on to someone else. "Well, well," Derek said, his tone dripping with false encouragement. "Looks like we've got ourselves a brave one, folks." Maggie rose slowly from her seat, her movements deliberate and graceful, despite the tremor she felt in her hands. The spotlight followed her as she made her way toward the stage, each step echoing in the now hushed auditorium. As she walked, memories flooded back like a dam bursting open. She was 22 again, standing in a recording studio in Memphis, providing backup vocals for legends whose names were now etched in the Country Music Hall of Fame. She remembered the weight of the headphones, the warmth of the studio lights, the pure joy of harmony blending with melody. "Take your time, dear," Derek called out with exaggerated patience, his voice laced with sarcasm. "We've got all night." A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably at his tone. Maggie reached the side steps of the stage, and a stagehand offered his arm to help her up. She accepted graciously, whispering a quiet "thank you" that spoke volumes about her character. Standing on the stage now, under the blazing lights, Maggie looked smaller than she had in her seat. Her navy blue dress seemed simple against the elaborate backdrop, her silver hair modest compared to Derek's perfectly styled appearance. "So, what's your name, sweetheart?" Derek asked, holding the microphone close to her face. "Margaret Thompson," she replied softly, but her voice carried clearly through the sound system. "Most folks call me Maggie." "And what do you do, Maggie? Besides attend charity events, I mean." Derek's question came with a smirk that made several audience members cringe. Maggie paused, looking out over the sea of faces. Some looked sympathetic, others curious. A few seemed to be waiting for the spectacle to unfold. "I'm retired now," she said simply. "But I used to sing." "Oh, I bet you did," Derek laughed. "Church choir, right? Maybe some community theater?" He turned to the audience. "Let's hear it for our brave volunteer, folks." The applause was polite but hesitant, mixed with murmurs of concern from the older attendees who could see exactly what Derek was doing. But Maggie wasn't finished. "Actually," she said, her voice growing stronger, "I sang professionally for nearly 20 years. Studio work, mostly. Background vocals." Derek's expression faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Well, that's nice. Background vocals." He emphasized the word background with obvious dismissal. "So you were, what, part of the chorus? The girls who went ooh and ah behind the real singers?" Something in Maggie's eyes hardened. For a moment, the 72-year-old grandmother disappeared, replaced by the confident young woman who had once stood in studios alongside musical royalty. "Something like that," she said quietly. Derek handed her a microphone, his confidence returning. "Well then, let's see what you've got, Maggie. Any requests from the audience?" He turned to the crowd with theatrical flair. "What should Grandma sing for us?" "How about you let me choose?" Maggie said, her voice carrying a new authority that made Derek pause. She walked to center stage, testing the microphone with a gentle tap. The venue fell completely silent, hundreds of people holding their breath. "I'd like to sing something that means a lot to me," Maggie announced, her voice now filling the space with surprising strength. "A song I helped bring to life many years ago." Maggie closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, something remarkable had happened. The nervous elderly woman had vanished, replaced by a performer who belonged on that stage. "This is Amazing Grace," she announced, "but not the version you might know." Without any musical accompaniment, Maggie began to sing. Her first note emerged pure and clear, floating through the auditorium like honey over silk. The sound was so unexpected, so powerfully beautiful, that several people in the front row audibly gasped. Amazing Grace! How sweet the sound! Her voice carried decades of experience, pain, joy, and wisdom. It wasn't the voice of a 72-year-old grandmother. It was the voice of someone who had lived, loved, lost, and found redemption in the most unexpected places. Derek stood frozen beside her, his mouth slightly open. This wasn't what he had expected. This wasn't some wobbly church choir performance. This was the voice of a seasoned professional, rich with vibrato and emotional depth that only comes from years of genuine artistry. That saved a wretch like me. The audience was completely silent now, transfixed. Phone cameras had come out, but instead of recording for mockery, people were capturing something magical. Maggie's voice filled every corner of the venue, each note delivered with precision and soul. Mrs. Patterson had tears streaming down her face. She'd known Maggie for 15 years, but had never heard her sing like this. None of her neighbors had. Maggie had kept this part of herself locked away, buried under decades of caregiving and quiet living. "I once was lost, but now am found." As Maggie continued, something extraordinary happened. Other voices began to join her, first a few people in the front rows, then more throughout the auditorium. But they weren't overpowering her voice. They were supporting it, creating a harmony that transformed the entire venue into something sacred. Derek remained motionless, his golden jacket suddenly seeming garish under the stage lights. The cocky expression had completely disappeared from his face, replaced by something that looked like awe mixed with shame. "Was blind, but now I see." When Maggie reached the final note, she held it with the control of someone who had spent years perfecting her craft. The note seemed to hang in the air forever, pure and unwavering, before gently fading into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence stretched on, filled with the weight of what had just occurred. Then someone in the back of the auditorium started clapping, slowly at first, then joined by others, until the entire venue erupted in thunderous applause. People weren't just clapping. They were standing, cheering, whistling. Many were wiping tears from their eyes. Derek looked around at the crowd, then back at Maggie, who stood quietly at center stage, her hands folded in front of her. She wasn't basking in the applause. She looked almost surprised by the response. Derek started to speak into his microphone, but his voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. "That was incredible." The applause continued for nearly 2 full minutes. Someone shouted, "More! More!" And the chant was taken up by dozens of voices throughout the auditorium. Maggie raised her hand gently, and the crowd gradually quieted. "Thank you," she said simply. "That's all I wanted to share." But Derek wasn't ready to let her leave. Something had fundamentally shifted in him during those few minutes. The arrogant performer who had mocked her just moments before was gone. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please, wait." Derek's golden jacket seemed to dim under the stage lights as he struggled to find words. The microphone trembled slightly in his hand as he looked at Maggie, then out at the hundreds of faces watching him. He began, then stopped. The practiced showmanship was gone, replaced by raw honesty. "I owe you an apology, a huge apology." Maggie turned to face him fully, her expression gentle but expectant. The crowd remained silent, sensing something important was happening. "I thought I knew what talent looked like," Derek continued, his voice growing stronger. "I thought it was about the clothes, the production, the attitude." He gestured to his elaborate outfit with obvious embarrassment. "But I was wrong, dead wrong." He walked closer to Maggie, speaking directly to her now, rather than performing for the audience. "Ma'am, I'm sorry for how I treated you. You didn't deserve that disrespect. and neither did anyone else in this audience. Maggie's expression softened. "It's all right, son. We all make mistakes." "No, it's not all right," Derek insisted. "I made assumptions based on your age, your appearance, your quiet demeanor. I thought I was better than you, and I couldn't have been more wrong." His voice cracked with emotion. "That performance, your voice, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard on any stage." The audience was captivated, watching this unlikely moment of genuine human connection unfold before them. Derek turned back to the crowd, his vulnerability visible to everyone. "Folks, I came here tonight thinking I was going to entertain you. Instead, this remarkable woman just taught me the most important lesson of my career." He looked back at Maggie. Would you tell us about your background, about your singing?" Maggie considered for a moment, then nodded. "I started singing professionally in 1968, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the venue. "I was blessed to work with some wonderful artists over the years, providing harmonies and background vocals for recordings that you might know." "Who did you work with?" Derek asked, genuinely curious now. "Oh, various folks," Maggie said modestly. "I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I worked on sessions with artists who went on to become household names, but back then, we background singers didn't get much recognition. We were just happy to be part of the music." An older gentleman in the audience stood up. "Excuse me," he called out. "Ma'am, was your maiden name Margaret Sullivan?" Maggie looked surprised. "Why, yes, it was." The man's face lit up with recognition. "Folks, this lady sang on some of the most famous country records of the 1970s. Her voice is on albums that sold millions of copies." A murmur of amazement rippled through the crowd. Derek looked stunned. "I stopped performing in 1982, Maggie continued. "My husband became ill, and I chose to focus on taking care of him and raising our children. Music was wonderful, but family came first." Derek shook his head in wonder. "You gave up a professional singing career to care for your family?" "It wasn't giving up," Maggie said firmly. "It was choosing what mattered most. I sang lullabies to my children and grandchildren. I sang at church. Music never left my life. It just took different forms." "But didn't you miss it? The stage, the recognition?" Maggie smiled, and for a moment she looked decades younger. "Son, real joy in music doesn't come from recognition or applause. It comes from touching hearts, from sharing something beautiful with others. Tonight, I got to do that again, and it feels wonderful." The audience erupted in applause once more, but this time Derek was clapping too, his face transformed by genuine admiration and respect. Derek set down his microphone and began to applaud, his hands coming together in slow, deliberate claps that echoed through the now quiet auditorium. The gesture was so unexpected, so humble, that it sent a wave of emotion through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, picking up the microphone again, "I need to be honest with all of you. When I walked onto this stage tonight, I thought I was the most talented person in this building. I was wrong." His voice carried a weight of genuine remorse. "The most talented person in this building is standing right here beside me, and I almost missed it because I was too arrogant to see past my own assumptions." Maggie placed a gentle hand on Derek's arm. "You're very kind, but—" "No," Derek interrupted softly. "I'm not being kind. I'm being truthful for the first time in a long time." He turned to address the audience directly. "How many of you have ever been dismissed because of your age? Because someone thought you weren't relevant anymore?" Dozens of hands went up throughout the auditorium, particularly among the older attendees. Derek nodded, his expression grave. "I did that tonight. I looked at this beautiful, dignified woman and saw only someone to mock. I didn't see her experience, her wisdom, her incredible talent. I saw someone I thought I could use for a cheap laugh." His voice grew stronger. "That's not entertainment. That's cruelty." The venue was utterly silent now, hundreds of people hanging on his every word. "Mrs. Thompson," Derek continued, turning back to Maggie, "you've given me a gift tonight. You've shown me what real grace looks like. You could have walked away when I was being disrespectful. You could have let me continue making a fool of myself. Instead, you chose to share your gift with all of us." Maggie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We all have gifts, Derek. Sometimes it just takes the right moment for them to shine." "But that's exactly my point," Derek said, his voice rising with passionate conviction. "How many gifts do we miss because we're too busy judging the package they come in? How many incredible voices go unheard because we decide someone's too old, too young, too different from what we expect? He walked to the edge of the stage, addressing the audience with newfound purpose. I built my career thinking that youth and flash were all that mattered. Tonight, a 72-year-old grandmother just schooled me on what real artistry looks like. The crowd began to murmur approval, several people calling out, "That's right," and "Amen." Derek returned to Maggie's side. "Would you do me an honor? Would you sing with me? I'd love to learn from you." Maggie looked surprised. "Oh, I don't know your songs, dear." "Then teach me one of yours," Derek said earnestly. "Please, I want to learn what it feels like to make music instead of just making noise." After a moment's consideration, Maggie nodded. "Do you know, 'How Great Thou Art'?" Derek's face lit up. "My grandmother used to sing that to me when I was little." Together, they began to sing the old hymn. Derek's trained voice blended with Maggie's experienced one, creating something neither could have achieved alone. His youthful energy complemented her seasoned wisdom, his technical skill enhanced by her emotional depth. The audience joined in, voices of all ages combining in harmony that filled the historic venue with something magical. Young voices blended with old, trained singers, harmonized with enthusiastic amateurs. And for those few minutes, the entire auditorium became a choir. When the song ended, the applause was different, deeper, more meaningful. This wasn't applause for a performance. It was applause for a moment of genuine human connection. Derek took Maggie's hand and raised it high. "Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret Thompson, a true artist and an even truer teacher." As the applause continued, Derek leaned close to Maggie. "Thank you," he whispered. "You've changed my life tonight." "No, son," Maggie replied with a warm smile. "You changed your own life. I just gave you the opportunity." The evening continued with Derek performing his planned set, but something fundamental had shifted. His attitude was different, more humble, more connected to the audience. He dedicated each song to the teachers in our lives who help us become better than we thought possible. As the show concluded and people began filing out, many stopped to speak with Maggie, who had returned to her seat. They shared stories of their own hidden talents, their dreams deferred but not forgotten, their experiences of being underestimated because of age or appearance. The charity event had raised money for its intended cause, but it had given everyone something more valuable, a reminder that wisdom, talent, and dignity come in many forms, and that it's never too late to share your gifts with the world. What an incredible evening that was, folks. Maggie Thompson showed us that real talent isn't about age, appearance, or fancy packaging. It's about the heart and soul you pour into your art. This story reminds us to never judge a book by its cover, and to always treat others with respect and dignity. Everyone has a story, everyone has gifts, and everyone deserves to be heard. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Have you ever been underestimated because of your age or appearance? Do you have a hidden talent that you've been afraid to share? And if this story touched your heart like it touched mine, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear Maggie's message. Sometimes the most powerful voices come from the most unexpected places. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to let your light shine.